What happens after we die? It's one of the most important questions we can ever ask. We've seen that the central claim of Christianity is that Jesus rose from the dead. This confirms that God is real. It confirms who Jesus is, that he's the Son of God. And because of this, we can know what will happen when we die. But is it possible that Jesus never really died on the cross?
When I was studying ancient history at school, I remember one of my teachers saying to me, you have to remember that when you're dealing with the Romans, if you think of the nastiest motive you can imagine, that's probably the right one. Of course, that's cynical. There were nice Romans, there were Romans with a social conscience, etc., etc. But one of the things the Romans were famous for, right around the known world, was their military efficiency, and one of the things that soldiers characteristically do is to kill people. The Romans were professional killers. That was what they did for a living, those soldiers. And the soldiers at the foot of the cross, if they had for a moment suspected that Jesus was still alive, they had all sorts of interesting and nasty ways of making sure that people were dead.
Well, some people have tried to come up with a theory called the swoon fit theory, the idea that Jesus didn't actually die, the Romans didn't actually kill him, but he looked as if he was dead and he was placed in the tomb and then he revived. I think this would take a lot of credulity to believe. The Romans were absolute masters at execution. They knew how to kill people. And the accounts of Jesus' death indicate very strongly that he had been killed. For example, the separation of what appeared to be blood and water from his side after he died is an indication, a strong indication that he was actually dead by an eyewitness who didn't know that that was a medical proof of death at the time.
Interestingly, John, in his Gospel, says that they were surprised that he appeared to be dead, and so they thrust a spear into his side, and then that extraordinary detail that there came out blood and water, because the vital liquids had already separated out. Jesus had already been dead long enough for that to happen. That sort of eyewitness touch makes it quite clear, but if you don't think that that is sufficiently convincing, then frankly, even a small amount of knowledge of what a Roman centurion was good at and was paid for and was proud of being able to do will tell you that there is no way on earth that they would have let a still half alive Jesus be taken down from the cross.
You don't have to be somebody with a stethoscope to be sure that the man on the cross is dead. And the general consensus is that when a person hangs in that position, I mean, they've actually done experiments, when the person hangs in that general cross position, they asphyxiate. And so you could be sitting there, have absolutely no medical training, but if the person's hanging in what's called the low position on the cross, the weight of the body pulls down on the intercostal, pectoral, and deltoid muscles, the same muscles you work out in a gym, and they constrict around the lungs, and a person is decreasingly able to exhale, so they can't breathe. So what I'm saying is, a person standing there would know that if the person's in the low position, you don't fake that. It would be like holding your breath for 20 minutes underwater and say, I hope nobody notices that I'm alive. Well, you're going to be dead. If you sink down low on the cross and don't push back up to get air, it's not going to last very long. In fact, one set of experiments years ago showed that these male volunteers passed out in a maximum of 11 minutes if they're just hanging there. Now, of course, Jesus could push back up because of nails, but that's just the point. If he wasn't, then he's not breathing.
Well, anything is possible, but historians don't look for mere possibilities. We look for probabilities. And that's why using the criteria for the best explanation, controlled historical method, is so important, because it reveals the strengths and the weaknesses behind various hypotheses. So something like Jesus didn't die by crucifixion. He actually survived crucifixion. This is something that I don't know of a single widely respected scholar in the world who would even consider this today, because the process of crucifixion was so brutal and the chances of surviving it were extremely low. So that's why we got to look at probabilities here, not mere possibilities.
Today it's very interesting that virtually no scholars, people who are well trained in the field, terminal degrees, responsible teaching positions, peer-reviewed publications, whatever their spectrum, left, right, center, virtually never does anyone question the facticity of the death of Jesus. In fact, John Dominic Crossan of the Jesus Seminar, Marcus Borg of the Jesus Seminar, they both say independently that the crucifixion is about the best attested event in the ancient world. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Best attested event.
The crucifixion of Jesus is the one fact about Jesus of Nazareth that is universally recognized by historians, liberal or conservative, Christian or non-Christian. The crucifixion of Jesus is so indisputably established that it is an anchor point for understanding who the historical Jesus was.
But let's imagine that for a moment that they didn't, that there was this one exception, they didn't know how to kill, Jesus wasn't actually dead. Well, we're told that he was placed in the grave with pounds of spices on top of him and very tightly bound. So Jesus would have needed to have escaped from this tight bondage with very heavy spices on top of him, then remove an enormous stone which had been placed over the grave and then overpower a Roman guard. I think it would take more to believe that than that he had risen from the grave. And that's why scholars who look into this have found, as they look at the alternatives, that the miraculous explanation is actually a persuasive one. The naturalistic explanation doesn't make sense.
Let's just say Jesus hung on the cross for 6 hours. He's been seriously beaten up. He's been pushed around. He's got a crown of thorns. He's got nail wounds in his wrists and feet. And basically, by the calendar, 2 days later, 3 days by the Jewish reckoning, he's going to get up and walk to where the disciples are on feet that were on nails for 6 hours. He's going to walk to them. He's going to be pale. He's going to have worked the wounds open again. He's bleeding. Hasn't even been able to wash his hair. Looks horrible. I think this would, to be honest, I think this would be the Christian response. It'd be more like, wow, God answered prayer. Now let's go get the doctor. Because we believe the Lord can use doctors. So let's go get the doctor. He needs some help. But they don't. As he walks into the room or appears behind walls, people don't say, wow, look at him. Someday I'm going to have a resurrection body just like his.
No serious scholar today thinks that Jesus survived being crucified. The Roman soldiers knew how to make sure that someone was dead. And even if, against all the odds, Jesus had survived, his followers wouldn't have mistaken his injured body for someone who'd risen from the dead. Next time, we'll examine whether Jesus' followers were lying when they claimed that he'd risen from the dead, whether it was a massive hoax.